Culture does not make people, people make culture. It's impossible to talk about knowledge without addressing the way people work together, learn together, and grow in knowledge individually and collectively.
Hello everyone, I'm Trevor and welcome back to the Knowledge Management e-learning modules prepared for the Philippine Red Cross. This module will be focused on knowledge management culture and the teamwork that comes with it. I'm looking forward to you watching this video because it should be one of the more fun modules with lots of interesting examples. Let's start with a tough question. What is culture? Most simply put, culture is the social behavior and norms found in human societies. Culture is how we interact with each other according to the rules and patterns that have been established over time. You do not have your own culture, but your special project, Red Cross Service, and Red Cross Chapter will each have its own culture. Because culture is intimately tied with how we interact with the people around us, it is intricately tied with teamwork as well. And when members of a team are constantly working and sharing knowledge with each other, the capability of the team overall is enhanced. Another thing that you have to remember going into this video is that culture is self-perpetuating. Culture mirrors behaviors already being practiced. What does this mean? Well, if your current culture discourages openness and collaboration, your future culture is also likely to discourage openness and collaboration. But don't worry, because the opposite is also true. Good behavior and collaborative cultures are also self-perpetuating, because as we'll find out, organizations are often successful largely because of the culture they create. So then, what specifically is knowledge management culture? Well, it is a combination of many subjects that we have already been discussing. Remember the knowledge management process model? Well, now that we have learned about the fundamentals of leadership and theory of knowledge management, we are able to build up to culture in our colorful wheel. In the last video on leadership, we discussed the 5 ingredients of successful collaboration and knowledge sharing. And do you remember way back a few videos ago when we learned the 4 ways to encourage the sharing of tacit knowledge? They were socialization, mentorship, meetings, and collisions. Well, these were both ways of encouraging a healthy knowledge management culture, and now we're going to learn what collisions are. No, still not in that sense. Or in that sense. Before we get too deep, I would like to introduce The Culture Code, an excellent book by Daniel Coyle, to which I'll be referring to often in the next few videos, because it provides amazing insights of how different teams communicate and share information, which is what knowledge management culture is all about. Let's find out a little bit more about the book.
Why do certain groups add up to be greater than the sum of their parts, while others end up to be less? To find the answer, an engineer devised an ingenious contest: kindergartners versus CEOs. Multiple teams were assigned the same task: build a tower using uncooked spaghetti, tape, string, and a single marshmallow. The tallest wins. If you had to bet your life savings on which group would win, you'd probably bet on the teams of CEOs, but the teams of kindergartners won every time. The kids thrived, not because they are smarter, but because they worked together in a smarter way. They tapped into a simple and powerful method in which a group of ordinary people can create something extraordinary. Successful culture isn't luck or magic. It's a set of skills you can learn. Culture code is the story of how that method works.
People-to-people encounters are a constant theme of the culture code, and these are labeled as collisions. Simply put, collisions are a way of describing encounters between two people. Think of entering your office and walking straight into your colleague. Most of the time you say sorry and move on, but maybe, sometimes, that brief run-in is just enough to get caught up on what your colleague is working on. This applies to people sharing lunch, attending parties, talking before meetings, and every time you interact with a colleague. Remember earlier we said that you learn something every time you talk to someone? Coyle's book argues that the more often you talk to more of your colleagues, the more likely your organization is to be successful. These don't need to be long talks or formal meetings. Coyle makes the case that the 5-year-old kindergartners are more successful at building the spaghetti and marshmallow towers because they communicate in short bursts while ignoring seniority and hierarchy. Just imagine many 5-year-old kids building this tower. They are giving each other constant feedback and constantly trying different things. Try this. No. Try this. They will use any ideas that work. This idea of collisions and constant interactions is similar to what Myrna Ali described when she wrote that, quote, continuing conversation through daily work activities continually builds both tacit and explicit knowledge, unquote. Having a good knowledge management culture is one that allows for collaboration while encouraging innovation, learning, experimentation, scrutiny, and reflections regarding all types of work. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. Trevor, there is no way that 5-year-old kids can outperform corporate CEOs in building competitions. And unfortunately, this e-learning doesn't come with spaghetti and marshmallows and CEOs to be able to repeat this test for ourselves. But I do have a short activity that you can do to highlight the power of teamwork. I know you're probably by yourself right now, but I would like you to at least mentally try to do this activity. Try it by yourself first, and then if you want, go grab a partner and do it together to compare your results. So, here it goes. We're familiar with corporate logos from all over the world, and we can recognize hundreds of them instantly. But can you draw them from memory by yourself? Notice that none of the logos flashed on this screen so far belong to Philippine brands, only international ones. Now I'm going to throw out some Filipino brands, and you see if you can draw them or mentally imagine what they look like. Pause the video if you want as I say the names. Jollibee, Globe Telecom, Chowking, Red Horse, Cebu Pacific, Land Bank, BPI, Smart Communications. If you live in the Philippines, there is near 100% chance that you have heard of these major Philippine brands. They advertise constantly and post their logos absolutely everywhere. You cannot walk down the street without seeing them. However, if you are like me, you cannot draw any of these logos exactly from your memory. Now, find a partner and try working together with a friend to produce the same results. Your results will almost certainly be better. Maybe one of you remembers what the Jollibee's hat looks like, while another person will remember the horseshoe in the Red Horse or the gear in Land Bank. I know that the Globe Telecom logo is a blue globe, but I can't tell you anything more than that. And if you don't have a partner for this, just imagine that you're able to recall twice as many details and how much that would have improved your results. So, what did we take away from this? What is the exercise all about? I like this exercise because it shows the usefulness of working together as a team to share knowledge and how the combined knowledge of a team can can be far more powerful than the knowledge of just a single individual. If you do this with multiple friends, you can instantly share knowledge with each other to correct and improve your drawings of the logos. Does that remind you of anything? Maybe of how those 5-year-old kids were able to build the taller tower every single time? Let's change gears here. So what does the culture of the Philippine Red Cross have to do with retaining volunteers? Well, remember that culture is self-perpetuating, and having a good culture is like having a contagious disease that spreads. Except don't worry, because this is good. We want this disease of good culture to spread. One of the keys to volunteer retention is frequent engagement. Well then, just how important is engagement to successful groups? Let's turn back to the Culture Code for another example. A Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor named Thomas Allen conducted research into what characteristics groups that successfully completed their projects shared. Was it their education, intelligence, similar upbringings or backgrounds? No, it was none of these. Allen found that the successful groups had their desks closer to each other. They sat closer to each other during the day and communicated more. When colleagues were separated, their interactions dropped off dramatically. Allen explained that it turns out that vertical separation is a very serious thing. If you're on a different floor in some organizations, you might as well be in a different country. I personally do not think this quote fully applies to the Philippine Red Cross, especially given the long ties of friendship and familial relationships among many staff and volunteers. However, keep in mind that every single CADAC project has the special project staff and regular staff working on different floors or different buildings entirely. This reduces interactions and collisions between the staff. This also helps explain the disconnect between RC-143 volunteers and chapter staff. Coyle makes the case that, quote, we're far more likely to text, email, and interact virtually with people who are physically close, unquote. Given the distance between most RC-143 volunteers and chapter staff, it is then very easy to understand the infrequency of communication between the two. However, now that we're aware of this, we can try to correct it. We can try to make efforts to engage with volunteers more and encourage them to come out to Red Cross events in or close to their barangays, even if they are not directly involved. The more you see each other, the more likely you will communicate with each other, and the more likely it becomes that both RC-143 volunteers and chapter staff continue to engage with each other. Now, what about culture in a specifically Filipino context? For this, I've included some extra reading in the form of a blog posting linked in the Google Classroom that discusses leadership and culture in a Philippine workplace. It was insightful for me to read, and one of my Filipino friends said that the observations the author makes are very accurate. So I encourage you to take a look at it. It discusses all of the phrases I have up on the screen right now. And remember that as a knowledge management volunteer, you have an obligation to ensure you are helping build the right culture for sharing knowledge in your organization. Ask yourself often if you are encouraging knowledge sharing and if you are setting a good example. Well, that's all for me right now. Thanks for watching this video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.